The lecture hall buzzed with the faint hum of translators and the rustling of feathers, scales, and various appendages. Seats formed a spiral around the central dais, a signature of Zenthari design, allowing all species to view the speaker without craning necks, eye stalks, or equivalent. Professor Krilthox of the Gentari Collective, tenured for 6 galactic cycles and decorated for academic diplomacy, adjusted the ambient temperature of the hall to a mild 303 Kelvin. It was a compromise. The mammalian species would sweat, the silicon-based ones would stay solid, and the aquatic beings had misting units in their booths. It was fair, balanced, except for one student. Human. 18 Terran years old. Sitting dead center, fourth coil from the dais. Leaned back, arms crossed, leg draped over the seat in front of her like she owned the place. She wasn't even using her translator. Just watching. Listening. Smirking. Professor Krilthox clicked 2 of his mandibles in mild annoyance. Her name was Calla Ryker. Her file was concerning. Not for academic reasons. Her marks were top tier. But the side notes, the incident logs, and, most importantly, the required accompaniment of a conflict counselor made it clear. This one had history. They always did. Class. Krilthox began, his voice modulating through over 100 linguistic matrices. Today we begin the study of interstellar colonial conflict, more specifically, the root wars of Sector Kylan. A dark chapter in which. That's the one where the Scarxi tried to lobotomize an entire species to stop an uprising, right? Calla interrupted, voice loud and clear, no translator needed. Her words echoed in perfect galactic standard. There was a pause. A silence heavy enough to crush atmospheres. Krilthox blinked 3 of his 9 eyes. Yes. Though we prefer to approach such topics with a measured. Yeah. Didn't work. The species they tried to break were humans. My great-granddad was in that war. Wanna see the scar he gave a Scarxi war priest? She asked, already reaching for her holotab. The collective tension in the room thickened. A Grallian in the back booth shuddered and shifted into its camouflage state. A Mectrothi larva curled tighter into its nutrient suit. Several of the more sensitive telepaths recoiled. Krilthox's side mandibles twitched. Miss Ryker, please. Let us continue with the sanctioned material. But Calla didn't stop. You're missing the context, Professor. The Scarxi didn't just try to lobotomize us. They were losing. Humans weren't supposed to be capable of multi-system coordination within 3 generations of first contact. We weren't supposed to use AI tacticians without oversight. We weren't supposed to survive orbital sterilization attempts. But we did. You're teaching a sanitized version. You're cutting the blood out of history. A low, vibrating trill began to emanate from the walls. Krilthox froze. The protocol had been triggered. That sound meant one thing. The conflict counselor had just entered the room. All heads turned as the doors hissed open and a creature twice the size of most students strode in, 4-legged, plated in biosynth armor, with glowing neural tendrils twitching in controlled patterns. A Threxan. Elite caste. Combat forged. The badge on its chest read, Counselor Verex, Human Specialist. It approached Calla's row, gave her a glance, then turned to Krilthox and bowed slightly. Situation. She disrupted the lesson. With e-graphic commentary, Krilthox explained, voice clipped, trying to maintain dignity. Verex turned to Calla. Why? Because he left out the part where the Kylan 9 treaty was signed with human warships parked over 9 Scarxi hatchworlds. Calla said, standing now. Because the class is pretending diplomacy happened in a vacuum instead of at gunpoint. Because we keep skipping what happens when you corner a human species with nothing to lose. The Threxan tilted its head. Continue. And that's when everything changed. Calla stepped into the dais circle. Not allowed. Not protocol. Krilthox began to protest, but Verex raised a limb. Let her speak, it growled. I've been sitting here for 3 weeks, Calla began, turning to face the spiral of alien students, watching your faces when human history comes up. You flinch. You whisper. You act like we're walking weapons. You're not wrong. We are. Murmurs rippled. She didn't stop. We're the ones who turned asteroid belts into carrier fleets. who weaponized black hole event horizons, who trained AIs to simulate enemy psychological collapse. We're the ones who fought off extinction 5 times before we ever left our home system. You think we're violent? She smiled, bitter and sharp. We're desperate. That's our secret. Humans don't survive because we're strong. We survive because we refuse to accept extinction. Because we get back up. Because when you erase our history, we remember it anyway, and we teach our kids to remember too. Verex nodded slowly. That's why I'm here, it said, turning to the class. To make sure you survive the truth. Not just the humans, but the rest of you. Because history isn't sterile. It's soaked in blood. And in a room with a human who knows what her ancestors endured, you need supervision. The silence that followed wasn't fearful. It was reverent. But even Krillthox couldn't speak for a moment. Calla walked back to her seat, calm and composed. No smirk this time. The professor cleared his throat. Perhaps it is time we restructured the curriculum. Verex answered for him. Or perhaps, it said, it's time you stopped pretending history doesn't bite back when you declaw it. From that day forward, the class changed. So did the academy. And within 2 cycles, a new rule was codified into interstellar educational protocol. No human shall be permitted in any interspecies history course without an assigned conflict counselor present at all times. Not because humans were dangerous, but because truth is. And humans never stopped telling it. The change was subtle at first. After Calla Ryker's eruption in the History Hall, and the now famous intervention by Counselor Verex, the Alien Academy didn't shut the course down. That would have made the humans more infamous. Instead, the administration adjusted. Quietly, carefully. They added reinforced sound baffles to the lecture chambers. Emergency de-escalation pheromone vents were installed behind every seat. And of course, the conflict counselor's dais, previously an overlooked niche near the exit, was upgraded into a permanent post beside the lecturer's podium. Always occupied. Always watching. But it wasn't just the academy that shifted. The students did. When Chapter 2 of Colonial Power Conflicts of the Galactic Expansion began, the atmosphere was no longer one of polite curiosity. It was cautious reverence. Like someone had uncovered a ticking device in the middle of the classroom, and everyone was now pretending it was a sculpture. Calla was back in her seat. Same position. Same attitude. But this time, no leg draped over the next row. No smirk. She was watching. Waiting. Professor Krillthox began cautiously. Today's topic is the Second Terraform War, centered around the contested biosphere of Venthera Prime. At the time, inhabited by native ecosystems later recognized as semi-sapient. They were, Calla cut in again, voice quiet but firm, recognized after the war. Convenient timing. Krillthox paused. Eyes flicked toward Verex, who gave no signal of concern. Correct, the professor admitted slowly. The Ventheran organisms were granted sapient classification post-conflict. The war itself was instigated when we arrived, Calla said, now louder, rising to her feet. We wanted the planet. It was perfect. The Ventheran ecology wasn't smart enough to negotiate, but it was too complex to ignore. So what did we do? She turned to the class. We weaponized the biosphere. Gene-hacked the predators to favor specific kill patterns. Altered atmospheric particulates to trigger targeted respiratory collapse in non-human organics. We didn't just take the planet. We rewrote its biology until it only liked us. A soft gasp issued from a Zolari student, its translucent skin pulsing with alarm. A Seraki flicked its tongue and hissed, but that's ecological genocide. Calla nodded without flinching. It was. It's in our history books. We don't hide it. We call it the Grey Bloom Campaign. You know why? No one spoke. Because the plant life turned gray as the oxygen ratios changed. Whole forests went colorless overnight. Our soldiers took photos in it. Smiling. Victorious. Krillthox opened his mouth, then closed it. Then tried again. You speak of it so plainly. That's because I'm not here to make anyone feel comfortable, Calla said. History's not supposed to be comfortable. Especially not ours. There was a quiet rustle as the room shifted. Nobody left. Nobody protested. But something unspoken moved between them, an understanding that the curriculum was now something else entirely. Calla returned to her seat, and Krillthox resumed. But not with the usual sanitized notes. He recalibrated the lecture in real time, pulling archived footage and human primary sources instead of galactic summaries. At one point, he played a Terran military broadcast from the end of the war, showing gray forests, reprogrammed wildlife, and soldiers singing victory chants. The room watched in stunned silence. When the lights came back on, the usually quiet Mectrathy larva spoke through its vocalizer. Why show pride in something so horrific? Calla looked at it, her face unreadable. Because if we don't, she said, someone else will rewrite it to look noble. Verex shifted beside the dais. This is why supervision is required, it said to the class. Not to restrain her, but to stop you from forgetting what you saw the moment you walk out of this room. The rest of the lesson continued in near silence. Every word weighed down by the enormity of truth. After class, as students filed out, many avoiding eye contact with Calla, one brave Agralian, feathers shifting nervously, stopped by her seat. You could lie, you know, it said. Soften the stories. Make your species look better. Calla tilted her head. Why would I? To fit in, the Agralian whispered. Calla laughed. I'm human. We don't fit in. We make space. And then we tell you exactly what we did to make it. The Agralian stared for a moment longer, then hurried away. That night, a petition went up across the Academy's interstellar network. Request to establish elective course, Human Historical Truths, Unfiltered Accounts from a Post-Expansion Species. Submitted by 57 students from 16 different worlds. The administration didn't know what to do with it. Neither did the Galactic Cultural Safety Council, which received 3 formal complaints from ambassadors who had heard rumors of the lecture content. But Counselor Verex submitted a counter-report. All standard containment protocols maintained. Human subject within behavioral thresholds. Recommends continuation of exposure with counselor oversight. Subject matter disruptive, but accurate. Instructionally vital. And so, Chapter 2 passed into quiet legend. Not because of a fight. Not because of violence. But because, for the first time, an entire class had to sit in their seats and confront the uncomfortable idea that the most dangerous thing a human could bring to a classroom was the truth. Not a literal one, though in a room full of species that practiced over 400 forms of postmortem ritual, the metaphor held weight. The lesson was supposed to be on the collapse of the Titan Accord, a once hopeful alliance of Outer Rim civilizations that crumbled after just 20 standard years. The topic had always been treated academically, clinically, a cautionary tale in diplomacy texts. But when Professor Krillthox activated the holoscreen and opened with, "Let us examine the root causes of the Accord's dissolution," Calla Ryker did not speak. She stood. Not to interrupt. Not this time. She walked down to the dais, calmly, as if it had already been agreed upon. Krillthox hesitated, began to object, but Counselor Verex made the slightest motion, and he held his tongue. Calla turned to the class. And without a word, activated her holotab. The screen lit up behind her, not with maps or timelines or casualty statistics, but with a single image. A Terran child. 8 years old. Half buried in rubble. Face smeared with soot. Eyes staring. Not dead. Not crying. Just watching. I'm not going to explain the Titan Accord, Calla said quietly. Because it's not a treaty. It's not a historical artifact. It's a grave. The room stilled. My uncle was on Ferris 4. A diplomatic engineer. Went to help establish one of the Accord's joint cities. Unity infrastructure, they called it. Concrete and trust. He died when the ceiling collapsed during the first orbital bombardment. That picture? She gestured to the screen. That was taken by his drone minutes before the transmission cut out. She paused. Let the image linger. The Accord didn't collapse because of bad politics or miscommunication. It collapsed because trust is a weapon. And when the wrong side realizes you're holding it, they take it from you and stab you with it. Krilthox's mandibles clicked uncertainly. You suggest betrayal? Calla turned to him. I suggest weaponized peace. The Zoril were never committed to the alliance. They joined to study human trade routes, extract our soft protocols, then initiated simultaneous uprisings on 3 signatory worlds. Ferris 4 was just the loudest. A Seraki student hissed again. But your retaliation was overwhelming. Calla offered. It always is. She tapped the holotab again. This time, a time-lapse of planetary surface transformation. Craters turned to domes. Domes to cities. Cities to outposts. All human. This is what we do, she said flatly. We grieve. Then we build. And we don't wait for permission. Another student, a 3-eyed Alvari diplomat's son, tentatively raised a limb. Why tell us this? What's the lesson? Calla looked at him. Really looked. You think history is dead. That it's something you can contain in words and recordings. But it isn't. History breathes. It stalks. It waits. And if you're lucky, it speaks before it bites. Verex nodded slowly. This is what I am here for, it said, voice low and gravelly. To ensure you survive her clarity. But I'm not trying to be dangerous, Calla added, softer now. I'm trying to give you armor. You all think the galaxy is cruel. That politics are volatile. That power is fragile. And it is. But humans... She glanced at the image of the child again. Humans figured out how to carry grief like it's a tool. We don't bury pain. We wield it. And when you sit in a history class with us, you're not learning about the past. You're learning what we did with it. The silence this time wasn't tense or fearful. It was mourning. Krilthox, who had once thought of humans as fascinating anomalies in the academic field, felt a shiver ripple through his mind. Not of fear, but of understanding. A clarity that no textbook had ever given him. I believe, he said slowly, it is time to amend the lecture plan again. Calla returned to her seat. Not triumphant. Just quiet. Thoughtful. And the screen faded to black. For the rest of the lesson, no one looked away. Afterward, as students gathered their belongings, a single prompt appeared on the Central Academy Bulletin. Proposed theme for next term's thesis symposium, Human Historical Trauma as a Model for Resilient Societal Adaptation. Below it, a note from the dean. Required, counselor presence for all human-involved panels. Required, unedited human testimonies. Required, respect. In the weeks that followed, other species began sharing their own dark histories. The Seraki admitted to a rebellion so brutal it left their planet sterile. The Igralians spoke of the War of Wings, where they cannibalized their own cities in the name of purity. Even the gentle Mektrothi revealed the truth of their larval cullings during times of famine. And always, Calla listened. Without judgment. Just a nod. And the words, that belongs in history too. The Academy would never be the same. Neither would the galaxy.